Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, as we get prepared to take our decimal test tomorrow, one of the things I've noticed that some of my students struggle with is rounding. That's why I spent time in tutoring last night, for those of you that joined us, on rounding so that you would have a greater chance of being successful on tomorrow's test. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to round to the hundredths, the tenths, and the whole number. When rounding to the whole number, it's like rounding to the ones place. We'll start with rounding to the nearest hundredth. We're going to take these two numbers, we're going to round them to the nearest hundredth. But the first thing we're going to do, Sushana, is identify in the number 3 and 986 thousandths, what digit is in the hundredths place?
8.
The 8 is in the hundredths place. So the 8 would be the number I either add 1 to or I leave the same. Sushana, what is in the hundredths place in the number 5 and 995 thousandths?
9.
The 9. So the 9 is going to be either the one I add 1 to or leave the same. So if I have a set of numbers and it says round to this place value whatever, I'm going to find the place value first. So now I've identified the place value I'm rounding to. Kiran, I'm looking behind the 8. So behind the 8 is a 6. So since the number behind it is 5 or greater, what do I do with this 8?
You add 1 to it?
I add 1. Very good. And that's a 9, and that's a 9, and that's a 3. Now what I don't want to see is then you bringing that 6 down. Where you round to is the last non-zero number you have. There's no other numbers behind it other than you can put zeros. Doesn't change it. But it's the last non-zero number you have. Next, Arshia. I have the 9. I look behind the 9, there's a 5. So what am I going to do to the 9, Arshia?
Round it.
So am I going to add 1 or leave it the same?
Add 1.
I'm going to add 1. And the reason I want you to add 1, not just say move it up, because this one's going to require some regrouping. I have 10 hundredths, which is the same as 1 tenth. I have 10 tenths, which is the same as 1 whole, which makes it 6. So 5 and 995 thousandths rounded to the nearest hundredth is 6.
What I do?
All right, let's round to the nearest tenth. The nearest tenth. Shh. 18 and 439, 15 and 469,000. All right. So I have 2 decimal numbers up there. Miriam, I have 18 and 439 thousandths. Miriam, what number is in the tenths place here?
4.
The 4. So the 4 is going to be the number I either add 1 to or I leave it the same. Everything behind it then becomes zeros. Miriam, what number is in the tenths place here?
4.
4. Wow, they're both 4. So I'm going to look behind it. In this first decimal number, 18 and 439 thousandths. Jolie, what am I going to do to the 4? Am I going to add 1 or leave it the
We're
same?
going to leave the same.
Why?
Because the number 3 is not bigger than 5, so if it's not bigger than 5, then it stays the same.
Good. If it's not bigger than 4, it stays the same.
4.
Okay? So then this ends up being 18 and 4 tenths. Don't bring down the 3. Don't bring down the 9. Just 18 and 4 tenths. And Buddy, I have a 4. Behind it, I have the 6. So what do I do with my 100th place? Or my 10th place, I mean. I add 1 because this is 5 or greater. So if I add 1, I get 15 and 5 tenths. 15 and 5 tenths. We're adding 1 or we're leaving it the same. Do not bring down the numbers behind it. Showing your work is going to greatly increase your chances of getting these things correct. Now we're going to round to the nearest whole number. Alexis, when I say I'm rounding to the nearest whole number,
Miami. Oh
yeah. Sam, when I say I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, what place value am I rounding to?
The 1.
The ones place. All right, Bray. In the number 39 and 429 thousandths, what number's in the ones place?
9.
The 9. So the 9 will be the one I either add 1 to it or I leave it the same. Bray, in the number 39 and 529 thousandths, what number's in the ones place? The 9. So the 9 will be the number I either add 1 to or I leave it the same. Mason, in the number 39 and 429 thousandths, what do I do with my 9?
You leave it the same.
Leave it the same, because 4 or less, it stays the same. So that just becomes 39. That just becomes 39. Kenna, what do I do with my 9 in 39 and 529 thousandths?
You would go over a point value and
Add 1. Good. 9 and 1 is 10. And so that's 40. That is 40. Show work. It makes your life easier. Makes your grade better. It keeps you out of summer school and repeating. Please subscribe.